Hey, what's up? In this episode, I talked to Jess Pryles from Hardcore Carnivore. We talk about her journey from Australia to Austin, where she now lives. We talk about her brand in general, her rubs, her shirts, her pins, her signature smoker, Jess Pryles signature smoker, which is really cool, and it'll be interesting for you to hear about that. We also talk about the Australasian Barbecue Alliance, which she co-founded. It's for Australia and New Zealand. Really, really interesting. We talk about her trip to Brazil that she's taking next week. And as well as we talk about meat science in general. We talk about her favorite barbecue books, talk about a myriad of things, jumping back and forth. I think you'll really enjoy it. And if you do like what you see, please subscribe. I'll be adding a lot more interviews in the near future. Thanks so much. Thank you so much. Okay, well, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I have coffee. There'll be more coffee to have, but it's a beautiful day in the great state of Texas.
That's fantastic. Do you have a busy day ahead of you?
I do. I'm doing a big cook tomorrow, so today we'll be trying to get as much admin stuff done as possible. And I'm actually headed to Brazil in 2 weeks, so I'm trying to nail down everything that I'm supposed to do for that.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, I think when you work for yourself, every day is a busy day in some way or another, for sure.
For sure. I'd like to get into the Brazil. Is a Brazil thing for your brand and for meat?
Yeah. I don't think I've taken a non-work related travel. I wouldn't even really call them vacations. I don't think I've done any non-related work travel in 3 years. I haven't actually had just a vacation, like go and lay on a beach and switch the phone off or anything in that time. So Brazil I'm going to an event called Churrascada, which is, I think it's the 15th one, and they run it like twice a year in different cities. And this is the big one in Sao Paulo, and there'll be, I believe, 1,500 people there. Wow. It sells out in about an hour, so I guess it's their version of TM Barbecue Fest.
Oh, cool.
And I'm one of the guest chefs, so I know John Tisa was there either last year or the year before.
Okay.
There've been a couple of people, but because my Hardcore Carnivore rub has been so popular down there, it's sort of, thanks to social media and Instagram, and there's a lot of Brazilian meat folks on Instagram.
Oh, there's tons. It seems that in my Instagram feed, when I do the search part, I see a lot.
Yeah. They're kind of crazy about it down there. And they're one of the biggest producers of beef in the world as well.
Oh,
so
for sure.
It kind of makes sense.
And it seems a lot of their stuff is very over the top in a good way.
Yes, it's not quite Salpe over the top. But, as it was explained to me as well, it's an interesting situation because most folks, it's nearly like if you're familiar at all with Hong Kong, most folks, especially in Sao Paulo, even if you have very good income, live in a small apartment because it's just so expensive there. So most of them don't have actually access to a proper grill, which I think is why it's fed the obsession even more to have these sort of events.
Oh, that makes sense. That's really, really cool. I'm excited to follow you and check it out. That's really cool.
I'm excited too. I've never been before, so it'll be, it's one thing to go to a new country. It's another thing to go to a new country and they say, we want you to do something in a smoker and we're going to provide the smoker and you've never seen the beef before.
Oh, well, the smile.
Sure.
I'm sure people will be drinking too.
Yeah, it's fine. Just caparinas for everyone.
Exactly. Well, I wanted to get into your history and how you made the transition from Australia to Austin and that whole thing. I know Burger Mary, but that's about. I don't know exactly how you made your transition, or how did you start? What did you do before this?
It was so I used to have a blog called Burger Mary because I was writing about the burgers and Bloody Marys that I'd eaten in Austin when I was a visitor. I'd always really enjoyed writing and I'd always enjoyed photography, and it seemed like a really good outlet. I have a degree in communications that I never really used. I think it's one of those things that you either have the acumen for it or you don't, despite, it's nice to have a piece of paper that says, you got smart, but, it helps beyond that. And so I was kind of using that as my outlet, and a few things happened to sort of get me to where I am now. And one of those was I made a decision very early on to stop writing negatively about people. So I wouldn't ever rate things, or if I had a bad experience, I just wouldn't write about it because I personally didn't feel like I was contributing anything by speaking negatively about someone's business, and that positive reinforcement could do the same job without actually harming someone or damaging.
That's exactly. No, I had a discussion a couple weeks ago with someone. That's my philosophy too. I feel like it doesn't help, and I know how much work goes into opening a restaurant and working at a restaurant, and
exactly. And so that was the first thing, and then I started coming back and forth to Austin. I visited just first as just a visitor and loved it, and kind of came back and had this great group of friends that I developed here and kept coming back and forth. And then at the same time, I started to get into barbecue, having eaten it here in Texas. And it was just in its infancy in Australia. And so I was sort of working as a translator in some ways, like, well, why is brisket here different? And what makes it different? And what makes it different in its raw form? And why is the cut different? And I don't understand. And what's this muscle? And like just that little act of trying to figure out why brisket's different in its raw form from one country to the other put me on the path to where I am now, which I'll get into in a second. I'm trying to run through this as quickly as I can. No, that's
okay. Take your time, but also, Ryan, you have a tight schedule, so I understand.
It's kind of convoluted, but so
these interviews are always convoluted because it's coming from me, and that's how my brain works.
I eventually ended up moving here, and shortly, pretty much before I'd moved, I'd also made the decision that I didn't really want to talk about other people's food as much anymore. I wanted to talk about my own food or articles that generally help. So you'll see like anything on the website that is a sort of restaurant. I wouldn't even call them a review, but a profile is at least 3 or 4 years old now, at least. And it's pretty much, I publish a new recipe every week. I write a lot of helpful articles from a meat science perspective. So as I delved more into it and as I got more excited about figuring out this brisket thing and going back and forth, that got me more interested in the butchering side of things and the scientific side of meat and things that are quantifiable, because there's always arguments that are just up to personal preference.
For sure.
And there are things that have been scientifically proven, even though some people will still argue with you about that.
Of course.
But I like that aspect. And so carrying all that through together at the same time kind of led me, I ended up obviously dropping Burger Mary because people thought my name was Mary. And also I wasn't writing about that. I was writing about my stuff. So that got dropped a couple of years ago now, and I've been writing under my own name and cooking under my own name. And, yeah.
So, but when you were in Australia, were you doing some marketing prior to that, or did you just decide to jump right into the barbecue world? Like, were you, because I was looking at the pronunciation. It's Australasian, right? Like, it's not.
It's Australasian. Yes, that means it encompasses. New Zealand hates this, but if you say Australasian, it means Australia and New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
And they hate it because they don't feel like an independent country. However, that's why we chose to do that, just so we could group in more. And now we are in New Zealand too, so we've tried to group in more countries in the region too. And for those who don't know, Australasian Barbecue Alliance is the largest sanctioning body for barbecue in the Southern Hemisphere. Okay. And me and a guy called Adam and Jay co-founded that. And
what do you do with that? Do you put on demonstrations? Do you put on events? Is that mostly what you do, or just?
The ABA is a sanctioning body, so we sanction barbecue events. So in the very beginning, and obviously it's changed a lot since then, but I basically wrote the rules to start, and we've adjusted over the years to be, based on what our teams want and what we found to be more prevalent in Australia. So, for example, lamb is a mandatory category down there, but effectively, its primary position is to sanction barbecue competitions with its rules, and we have a head judges and a judging system. And the secondary serves as just an educational body for low and slow down under, because we didn't really have that style of cooking. So a lot of people default, like, I think their Facebook group now, or our Facebook group now, is one of the biggest. We've got Americans who want to join it,
That's cool. Okay. I'll put a bunch of links in the show notes to that, because I think that's important.
Yes. It is very Australian, though. Like, just fair warning, if you decide to get on that group, you're going to see, like, different cuts, different language, different approaches, and you just got to let them do it their way. So.
Well, watching your YouTube videos down there, too, it's interesting. You do get that Australian bent for sure.
Yeah, and they have really taken it and run with it. It's exploded in popularity there, and it's interesting to see how it's changed. Like, compared to here, there's just a lot more. I know Australia's a big country, but most of the competitions have been happening in urban areas or urban areas, and there's not a lot of room for the individual teams, for example. So here you have a barbecue competition in Texas, you got as much room as you want, and everyone brings an RV, and you spread out. There it's like, here's your compartment that you're in, which is usually like a car space or two.
Oh, wow.
And everyone has sponsors, and everyone puts signs up, and like everyone's gone really hard with like this is professional kind of thing. It's interesting to see how it's sort of been adapted, and what's become important over there.
So now then you'll head to Australia often for this, like twice a year, 3 times a year? Or...
Yeah, I mean, it's run now. So, I obviously founded it, and then about a year after I founded it, I immigrated to the United States. So I'm not in the day-to-day anymore. I still, have a say in the major decisions, and we do things like the winner of this year's national leaderboard is going to compete in the World Food Championship, so I'll be there representing ABA, and we're about to sign a deal with Houston as well for reciprocity at the Houston Rodeo, which is kind of a big deal too.
Huge deal,
so
yeah.
I'm sort of more an Australian ambassador in America now. But I do go back, and when I do go back, it's always like either to host Meat Stock, which is one of the biggest competitions down there, which ABA sanctions, or I'm going back actually at the end of August to launch a cookbook, which won't be available in America till next year. But
your cookbook's not available till next year? I thought it was coming out soon.
So it is coming out soon, but I signed with an Australian publisher. Okay. So it comes out in Australia, then the UK, and we're just negotiating the final details of the American release now.
Okay, that makes sense. So that's a good transition to Hardcore Carnivore. How did that start out, and what is it now?
So Hardcore Carnivore is my seasoning rub. I have a black and a red, and black was the first one, and it continues to be the most popular one. And it was one of those things where I'd seen a friend of mine in Australia who's originally from Alabama use a rub that had charcoal in it, and I thought it was really fascinating. And I didn't actually love the rub itself, like I didn't love the flavor profile, and it had a bunch of MSG in it, but I thought that the use of the charcoal was really interesting. So I started experimenting around with it and really changing the flavor profile dramatically, and it's really important to me with my products that they have. I mean, I don't make products for competition. So, and as much as I'm involved in the competition world, I've taken a big step back from judging. I'm on record as not being a huge fan of that food. And I think being a foodie and being comp barbecue are two different things, and that's okay, but you can separate them. Mm-hmm. So, I came up with this.
Was that 2 years ago? Or...
May last year, so it's just been out just over so it's done pretty well for itself. So I looked into the minimum orders of what I'd have to do to have the first batch, and I thought this is reasonable, and if it doesn't do well, everyone gets a Christmas present with my name on it. And then luckily enough, it resonated with people, because I guess that's the thing, like I released it because I thought it was a cool product, not because I felt like I needed a rub with my name on it.
That's better.
And that's been really helpful. Yeah.
And it's easier to get behind something that you're passionate about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the red came out just because the black doesn't look great on pork ribs. And I had a lot of comp teams who really liked the flavor profile. So I brought out a red version, and people who've been using it have been winning, which is nice.
That's awesome. That's really that's great. And then from there, you just kind of built out the brand with clothing and pins and hats and.
Yeah, I actually already had T-shirts in my line, like Jess Pryles T-shirts. But yeah, it built out naturally from there. And I guess that's the thing. It's now a whole merch range and a merch line, and I consider it's the T-shirts say Jess Pryles on the back, and so it's still tied in. So even if you've never heard of me and you just go to the site to find the rub, it's still going to be relevant to your interests.
Gotcha. Are you doing the carnivore ball? That's something you did before, right?
Yeah, so that happened 3 times in Austin, 3 times in Melbourne, and once in Sydney. And I didn't do it last year, and I probably won't do it again this year. I think it's safe to say that it's kind of been retired, but you never know. You never know. And that was just, what it was one of the first events anywhere in the world where we had different pitmasters do different dishes for a 3 or 4 course meal in a really nice setting. Like imagine you're going to like a country wedding, for example. So it was out in a cool barn and we had a country band playing. But as you for sure would be aware, it's exploded. Barbecue has exploded in popularity over the past few years, even though we always loved it, even in the States. And now, for example, in Austin, especially with the stuff that Texas Monthly does, at any given time, there's either a beer, bourbon, barbecue dinner or barbecue something. And I know that I've got loyal people who would definitely come back to it. But it had its run and I enjoyed doing it and I enjoyed the challenge, but I think that there's so much available now. I think it might just have to live its time in the past.
Well, and especially in Texas. Maybe if you did it in another state or another city that wanted something like that needed something.
And it's really hard to do. People wanted me to take it to other places, but it's like touring a band. You need to have every city you go to. It's then okay, venue. Staging. Where do I get this? Where do I get staff?
It's insane.
Not as easy as people think.
Well, and it's like it's not just one band; it's like 15 bands that you'd be traveling with. Yeah, so. But it was an awesome concept. I never went, but I did get a chance to see it online. Like I've seen a lot of stuff online, and it looked gorgeous. It looked amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're going to Brazil, and then what else? What other plans do you have for coming up? And also, I wanted to know, you were on the Today. Were you on the Today Show?
Yes.
How was that?
It was very intimidating.
No, I can imagine. That's why I'm asking.
Live grilling, only because, and I've had a little bit of TV experience. Like I've been on Food Network a couple times this year too, but doing live and knowing that they don't really care about the dish, you just need to hit the marks to get everything in 30 seconds. But really, Savannah, I was on with Savannah, and the host is so professional. They know how to speed you along or not. So it was just such a breeze. You just have to not think of the fact that it's going live to 7 million people as you're speaking words. And then you're fine. So that was super fun. But I've got Brazil coming up, then Australia, and I'll be at, it's called Barbecue Wars in Port Macquarie. It's our largest competition there, nearly 100 teams, I believe. Then I go to St. Louis and do a barbecue festival there that I've been invited to be sort of the guest pitmaster at. And there's just a lot of stuff always filtering in. I'm working on a cook school here in Austin. I've got my own signature smoker that just came out.
Yeah, tell me about that. That was on my list. How did that come about?
That was really, I have a great relationship with Pits and Spits, and they're a company that's been making smokers in Texas for nearly 40 years. And I've been quite vocal. You'll find that I'm quite vocal about things that I'm passionate about. Yeah. And I have, so I'm quite vocal about using a stick burner overall. I don't have a problem with anyone, whatever's easier for your yard. But I think if you're going to be in a position where you're teaching other people or purporting to be any kind of expert or any kind of authority on the subject, that you should be able as a baseline, just like you should be able to wash dishes in a kitchen to be a chef,
Oh yeah, without a doubt, yeah.
You should be able to use a stick burner and use it well. And of course,
did you help in the design? Excuse me. So
what happened was I had their basic model, and I said to Ryan, like, look, I appreciate that they'd given me that when I moved, and I said, look, I've got a few ideas for what I'd like to change, and also I'm not really sure that I'd just like to be cooking on more than the entry-level model. And he said, well, if you have a few ideas for how we can improve it, there's a great chance that other people would be interested in them too. We should put out a signature model because you're going to be custom made. And I was like, great. And we got together, and the only change I made to the smoker itself was to increase the size of the firebox, which gives you greater control. And I love cooking on it now. And every other detail was just kind of like logical things that seemed really logical to me, that when I put them out, everyone's like, oh yeah, that's like, oh, there's prep space. Oh, there's a roll holder, and oh my God, there's a dry box to store your things, So there's a few. It's a more functional unit overall, based on a great smoker with a company that's had decades of experience making them.
And do people order those do you have to order them ahead of time, or is it something that
Yes.
okay.
They're built to order, so
Built to
they're
order.
custom built to order. And I mean, mine is what it is, but there are different add-ons that you can do. For example, they do have an option of it, like a gas log lighter in there that comes standard on their pits, and if you want a baffle in it, they can do that too. So, I mean, technically speaking, that's not strictly a JP signature, but yeah, I think it'll be fine.
It's a slight tweak on slight tweak on the JP signature, right?
Exactly. And you know what? When you're paying that much and you're getting a custom built smoker, you should be well within your rights to make a few adjustments that make it yours.
So you have one. So are they're available now? You could start to order them now if you want to. Oh,
I have number 001. So they're not limited edition, but every single one of them is numbered and comes with a T-shirt that actually has the smoker on it that says like the pride and tradition of hard work.
Oh, that's cool. So can I find those directly, like from your website, or can I find those from their website?
Yeah, it's on mine. It's not very easy to find at the moment. I'm working on that. It's best to go to Pitts and Spitz, PITTSANDSPITTS.com, and you'll see it right there on the front page.
Oh, cool. And then for class-wise, you had said that you got more into the science of meat. Now, you went to Texas A&M's brisket camp?
I spoke at brisket
camp. Did you go to Meat Science University? Did you do any of those classes at any of those places, or?
Yeah, so there's courses. I've done a Beef 101 and a Beef 706 course at Texas A&M.
Okay.
And I've done, I went to barbecue camp as a participant originally, and then got invited to, speak at brisket camp after I'd gotten good at what I got good at. But I'd done a whole lot of other stuff in the meantime. So I did a lot of stuff in Australia, like visiting slaughterhouses, visiting with butchers, and speaking to professionals that, wasn't necessarily, I mean, there are meat science courses. You can spend 3 years at university and come out a meat scientist or animal science or animal behaviorist at the other end, for sure. And I don't mean to downplay any of that, because that's a full college course. But there are certainly ways when you're advanced in life and don't want to go back to college, you can spend time around folks that really know what they're doing and understand it and ask the right questions. And, Dr. Griffin at A&M, I've sent him a myriad of annoying questions, but they enjoy, it's all in the interest of publishing something accurate at the end of the day. Because a lot of when I publish something that's like hey, what is dry aging? Or what is Bortane? It's trying to correct any misnomers. So, for example, this weekend, I'm going to cook 2 racks of ribs, one with the membrane on and one with the membrane off, to try and show people it's not actually as complicated as they think in terms of uptake. It's pretty much that one of them is going to end up hard and papery. And also, when you lift a rib to your mouth, you always lift it to your mouth bone side down. So whatever's on that bone is going to hit your tongue. And if you take the membrane off, more rub can stick. Like, it's not rocket science, There's a logical theory to it, absolutely. But and that's what a lot of people don't realize, even casually banding the word butcher or scientist around. I mean, there are laboratory shear force tests to determine tenderness of meat. When they do taste tests, they're like full scientific studies with, control groups and huge numbers to be able to get an accurate reading. And it's not something that you should take lightly, but I feel like if it's explainable, like the membrane, we can probably explain that from our backyards.
Yeah, and everyone has probably seen that, and they've been around when they've had a rib that has the membrane still on it, and they know how it tastes and how it's kind of like the sandpapery, or kind of like paper,
See, Kevin, you would think that, and here's what's really interesting, because we go through our day just assuming that people think a certain way. I do anyway.
Yeah.
And I got on my Facebook and said I've got the opportunity to do some scientific testing coming up, which I'll be doing with Certified Angus later in the year to be presented at MBBQA. And we were trying to figure out what we wanted to go through. So I asked people the questions. And so this membrane thing was the number one talked about thing. And a lot of folks honestly didn't realize it was about the paperiness of it. They thought it was 100% as to how much the flavor changes because of the uptake of the rub, which is not really at all
No,
what it's
no,
about.
no, not at all. Wow, that's really
And that's
interesting.
why I figure like I should be able to myth bust that one with a simple demonstration of like, this is what it looks like. It never breaks down. This is papery on your tongue. Hi. So
That could be your highest rated video. You never know.
it could be. Gosh, could be. Although Brisket 101 is up there.
That's cool. Well, and with book wise, are there any books that you could recommend for like the meat science portion for that category? Are there, or maybe you could email me later on and I could put it in the show notes.
No,
But
there's two that immediately come to mind. I
okay.
mean, obviously, the biggest name in sort of barbecue science is Meathead Goldwyn, and he released his Meathead book last year, and he works with a lot of scientists to prove or disprove his theories. And obviously, like, it's nearly all-encompassing. He hasn't necessarily covered everything, and he comes at everything from a perspective of barbecuing.
Mm-hmm.
What I decided to do a couple of years ago for myself was there was a lot of things happening in the barbecue world, and I just sort of became generally meat focused, which is why I say hardcore carnivore, professional carnivore, not barbecue person.
Mm-hmm.
So I try and look at it just in meat in general, not always how meat reacts to smoke or not how that happens.
Oh, interesting.
So Meathead for sure. And then another book, which I just think, especially if you enjoy science in the kitchen, would be Kenji Lopez-Alt's book, The Food Lab. And he's very interesting. So he writes for Serious Eats. And he put out his own book, which is like this thick. It's like a tome. But everything that he does, and it's not all the way scientific like Meathead. He hasn't worked with a scientist, but a lot of it, like you said, is just logical. So he'll do a thing where he scrambled eggs and he left an egg out for 10 minutes before he scrambled it, cracked it, and then scrambled it right away and looked at the difference in color of the yolk. Does it bloom? Does it not? So it's nothing more than just repetitive testing in his own kitchen usually, but it's very, very interesting. And he, of course, has a whole meat section about it. And the most interesting thing that he did was he left a whole muscle out on the counter because, you hear everyone talk about let the meat come up to room temperature.
Uh-huh.
And he writes that you can't leave meat out for more than 4 hours. Even then, it's pushing it in a non-refrigerated
Without
state.
a doubt, yeah, for food safety.
So, I mean, it's 4 hours is what you're supposed to leave it in a water bath. So without any kind of heat at all, it's iffy. But he started and brought it out, and I think it was a steak, and kept temping it. And he found that it only raised something like 3 or 5 degrees internally.
Oh, that's
by
nominal.
the time it was about 3 hours out. And he's like, well, there's no point in keeping on measuring it because it's not going to be food safe to cook at this point.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and just little, and I think that that's perfectly fine. That you don't need to be in the laboratory to conduct an experiment like that, and it tells you a lot.
For sure. And it's also like your video on cooking a frozen steak. It's
right.
You're testing it. You're testing things out. I did some research prior to this.
There's a million variables. I mean, even when you look at scientific studies, like I know some of those like dry aging bags have had, have paid universities to do studies on their product, for example. But unless you know how to read a published scientific journal, you don't understand what the limitations are. So you have to decide exactly what your findings are going to be and exactly how you're going to run this experiment. So like, are you focusing on this or are you only focusing on this? And if you're only focusing on this, then of course your findings aren't going to include that. But if you don't know how to read that properly, so it's kind of the same with Kenji, like what was his control? What thermometer was he using? There's so much to it, but for all intents and purposes, for us in our kitchens, you can definitely do a lot at home.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Does that book have a white cover? I'm trying to think of.
Yes.
You know what? I'm embarrassed to say I think I have it. I don't. I think I had gotten it from somebody, and there's so much to do these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need a good injury to read everything.
There's a lot to read, but if you flick straight to the meat section, because there is a meat section, it's very interesting. It's very scientifically based, and I like science. It's logic.
So
I mean, at the end of the day, cooking is a lot about just natural acumen. You can have a thermometer and you can know what you're doing, but you still kind of just feel your way around the grill. That's something you can't teach. So science and coming at things from a logical perspective helps because it's translatable to everybody.
For sure. And then that with repetition, doing it more and more and starting to get used to it. Yes, for sure.
100%.
Well, thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to... Oh, you're a brand ambassador for a number of companies, correct?
Yeah. Yes, I have been a brand ambassador for a number of companies, but at the moment, it's mainly Gerber Knives,
okay,
which is fun. But that's something that it's so funny that you bring that up, Kevin, because I think like in today's environment, brand ambassador is such a used term. I feel like everybody on Instagram who starts an account automatically puts that in their bio now.
Oh, that's funny.
So maybe to clarify, like I literally get paid by companies to represent their product.
Uh-huh.
Maybe people want to clarify that when they're talking about being a brand ambassador or not.
Yeah, it does. There's just a fine line that people are kind of crossing often.
Yeah, I mean, and having said that, there's no ads on my website. I don't agree to represent every product that even wants to take out a sponsored post with me. I'm really, really protective of my brand and my interests, and I won't just kind of sell out like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do ever find me being a brand ambassador for something, it's a product that I really believe in. So for what that's worth. For that,
and do you have some events coming up in Austin soon?
Yeah, so it's kind of a keep an eye on the website kind of deal because it's like really in its infancy, but we're working on a pretty big project to do classes on a regular basis in a pretty outstanding space, which I'm really excited about.
Well, that's really cool. Well, excellent. Yeah. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day, a nice weekend, and have fun in Brazil. That should be incredible.
Thank you so much. It was really lovely to chat to you.
Nice talking to you. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.